Why do we act as we do? Behind every action lies a hidden motive, a whisper from the unconscious, an unseen force that shapes our thoughts, desires, and behaviors.
To uncover the why, we must first explore the how.
Welcome to Season 2 of Inside the Mind, where we decode the complexities of human nature through the lens of psychoanalytic theory, unraveling the truths embedded in literature and media.
Hello and welcome back to our season premiere of Inside the Mind. So, in this season, we're going to be talking about a beautiful Frenchman with the name of Jacques Lacan.
I'm sorry, it's Jacques Lacan.
Alright, whatever. Alright, so we're going to be talking about Lacan. Have you ever looked in a mirror and thought, that's me, I look pretty good today?
Sure, that's what a mirror is supposed to do.
Right, but what you see in that mirror isn't you. It's just a reflection, an idealized version. Jacques Lacan, the French
Jacques Lacan.
Jacques Lacan, the French psychoanalyst, called this the imaginary stage.
The imaginary?
Yes, think of it this way. When a baby sees its reflection for the first time, it thinks, that's me, I look complete. But the baby doesn't realize it's seeing an image, not reality.
So the imaginary is an illusion of perfection?
Exactly. Now think about the old self. What's the image we're taught to see?
We're taught to see grand plantation, beautiful woman, everything's just perfect.
That's the imaginary, an idealized version of the old self, a perfect reflection that people loved to believe in.
But it's not the whole picture though.
No, just like the cracked mirror. Look closer. The cracks tell another story. That's where the symbolic comes in.
So what's the symbolic?
The symbolic is a system of rules, names, and identities that hold society together. In Lacan's theory, it's the laws of the Father, how we define ourselves and our world.
So the old self had its own rules, titles like master, lady, and landowner?
Exactly. Those words gave people power and a less sense of identity, but they also hid the cracks.
So the symbolic helped maintain the illusion of the imaginary.
To explain Lacan's symbolic, let's use a quote from the Bible, Matthew 23:27-28. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye are like unto whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men's bones and of all uncleanliness. Even so ye also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within ye are full of hypocrisy and iniquity.
So, if you would recall, the beautiful whited sepulchres Jesus talked about, whitewashed tombs that looked pristine but were full of decay, represent the Old South symbolic order, the titles, the traditions. They covered up the bones beneath.
But what are the bones?
That's the hardest part to see. Lacan called it the real, the truth. We avoid it because it's painful. In the Old South, the real was slavery, injustice, and suffering. People ignored it because it shattered the perfect image.
Like the cracks in the mirror.
Yes, the real breaks through when the illusion collapses. People wanted to see beauty, so they ignored the decay, just like the whited sepulchres.
So the old South was a white sepulchre, on the outside it was white and beautiful, while on the inside it was filled with death, slavery, and blood of those slaves.
Exactly. What Lacan helps us understand is that the imaginary gave people an illusion of beauty. The symbolic kept it alive through laws and titles, but the real, the suffering, the injustice, was always there beneath the surface. The cracks expose the truth, and once you see them, you can't look away.
So the cracks helps us see the old South differently from those people who romanticize it.
Yes, instead of seeing just a polished reflection, we see the cracks, the real, breaking through an illusion. Lacan reminds us that beauty can hide the truth, but it can't erase it.
I don't want realism, I want magic. Yes, magic. I try to give that to people. I do misrepresent things. I don't tell truth. I tell what ought to be truth, and if that is sinful, then let it be punished for it. Don't turn the light on.
You know what I just realized, Shannon? I never seen you without a mask.
Yeah.
Why?
I just don't feel confident enough in my appearance.
You know what that reminds me of?
What?
This book I read last week called Streetcar Named Desire, and this character called Blanche. Let me tell you all.
Okay.
Blanche presents herself as this prim, proper and drop-dead gorgeous person. However, if a strong light were to be shown on her, her true self, the symbolical holds on her, and her delicate beauty would start to crack. For example, when she entered into Quality's house, she put on this paper lantern over the light in their house. And throughout the play, we see her doing the best that she can to avoid this light at any time. This is exactly what we see Shading doing here. Instead of hiding from a light, she is using a mask to hide her insecurity of having an quote-unquote imperfect nose.
We continue to explore Blanche's insecure sense of self when it comes to her age, because of her fear that others will judge her of being a woman in her 30s and yet to be married, adds to the chances of men not wanting her, and this includes fear of abandonment. This core issue leads to Blanche to lie about her age twice, first being that she is younger than Stella, although we know that Stella is 5 years younger than Blanche, making Blanche 30 years old. Yet, on her birthday, she claims to be 27, and this shows her resistance to change. She desperately wants to get married, and that is mostly led by her insecurity of being old and left all alone with no husband to keep with her in her life. Come in.
Hello.
Hello, Mateus. How are you?
Not so good.
Why is that?
My girlfriend broke up with me.
Okay, I see that. Why? What happened? Mateus?
You hear that?
Motor in the back with a trunk in the front. Smoking on gas, 5 in the blunt. Popping new tags, it's 1/1. I got them chopsticks, same on the lunch. Out the
Are
creek.
you okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
What happened right there?
No, I was just zoning out.
Mateus is expressing a form of defense mechanism called repression, which refers to the act of pushing painful memories or experiences into the unconscious mind. Repression is a central theme in A Streetcar Named Desire. Throughout the play, Blanche hides the trauma of her past, especially the loss of her husband, who committed suicide after she discovered he was homosexual. She represses these painful memories, presenting herself as delicate and refined. However, her past constantly lingers, and she attempts to shield herself from the overwhelming emotions by denying and distorting the truth. A key symbol of her repression is the Varsoviana song, which plays in her head during moments of anxiety and stress. Blanche hears the song when her mind is clouded, and the only way to stop the overwhelming anxiety is through the sound of gunshots, which she associates with silencing the music. In scene 9, she says, "That music again, the Varsoviana." All the polka tunes they were playing when Alan... Wait! A distant shot is heard. Blanche seems relieved. There now. The shot! It always stops after that. The polka music dies out again. Yes, now it stopped. The song represents her repressed trauma, and it surfaces when she is under stress. The gunshots provide temporary relief, showing that Blanche's defense mechanism is to block out her painful memories. However, this mechanism ultimately contributes to her psychological breakdown. The Varsoviana, tied to her trauma, is a constant reminder of her inability to escape the past.
Face and your fingers are disgustingly greasy. Go wash up and then help me clear the table.
Today, we're going to dig deep into the psyche of one of the most complex characters in modern theater, Stanley Kowalski, from A Streetcar Named Desire. Freud's psychoanalysis gives us the tools to understand his actions, especially through two important concepts, the id and the eros.
The id, right? That's the part of the psyche that's all about primal desires.
Yes, exactly. Let me explain a bit deeper. The id is the unconscious part of us driven by the pleasure principle. It doesn't care about morality, consequences, or even social rules. It's all about instant gratification. Imagine Stanley walking to a room full of people. What's the first thing that happens?
He wants something, he's gonna take it. No hesitation.
Exactly. Stanley's id operates like a force of nature. He's not thinking about whether it's morally right or socially acceptable. Take the scene when he hits Stella. His anger, his need to dominate. That's all coming from the id.
So Stanley doesn't care about the consequences, even when his actions hurt people. Like when he confronts Blanche, the id doesn't think about right and wrong. It just acts on impulse.
Now let's move on to Eros. In Freud's theory, Eros is the life of instinct, the desire for survival, pleasure, and even reproduction. But here's the twist. Eros, for Stanley, isn't just about having kids or staying alive. It's driven by his id.
So Stanley's Eros, his sexual desires, aren't purely about love or connection. They're tied to his id, which means it's driven by something more primal.
Exactly. Stanley's Eros is not romantic or compassionate. It's raw, impulsive, and fueled by his desire for more power and dominance. Take his relationship with Stella. He doesn't desire her love. Stanley's passion is about control, sex, and for him, it's tied up with the id's need for possession.
That makes sense. So you can see how Stanley sees Eros as a way to dominate, not just as means of emotional connection. His sexual attraction to Stella is a way for him to maintain power.
Right. And about Blanche, Stanley's attraction to her is a part of the same drive. His Eros is tied to his need to assert control and destroy. Notice how he views Blanche as a threat to his authority, but instead of rejecting her, he wants to overpower her. This is id, using Eros for domination.
It's like when he goes after her, trying to expose her past. His desire isn't just sexual. It's a way for stripping her down, breaking her, and it's desire to tear down what it doesn't understand or can't control.
So to recap, Stanley's id is impulsive, driven by his primal desires, and doesn't care about morality. His Eros is not about love or about power. His need to dominate, control, and destroy. That's what it makes Stanley so fascinating to study from a psychoanalytic perspective.
Hey, Stella! Hey, Stella! Mix it.
God, it's so attractive when men are aggressive.
You know, you remind me of Stella in her relationship with Stanley.
Oh, how so?
Let me tell you. In the beginning of the play, Stanley is described as primitive and animalistic, especially through his interactions with Stella. After Stanley's violent outburst during the poker game, Stella admits to being thrilled by his violence. Stella's decision to stay with Stanley after he physically abuses her can be understood through the lens of unconscious desire and past trauma.
Stella's relationship with Stanley reflects Sigmund Freud's theory of unresolved attachment to the id, the primal impulsive aspect of her psyche. Stanley represents a force of unfiltered aggression and desire, a figure who exerts a magnetic pull on Stella's unconscious mind. Stella's past may have involved unresolved issues with authority, power, or affection. Stanley's violent acts, which tend to be followed by moments of reconciliation, might subconsciously satisfy a need for control and resolution of this internal conflict. This repetition of violence as a form of connection could represent Stella's unresolved need for nurturing and punishment associated with early childhood development.
Stella's inability to leave Stanley may be seen as a product of both unconscious desire and psychological conditioning, where her attachment to him is a reflection of deep, unresolved emotional needs.
We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race, and the human race is filled with passion.
As a rule, the deeper you dive into the human brain, the more universal one's propensity for music and for emotion goes.
Stanchik is perhaps one of the earliest depictions of the sad clown paradox. What makes it even sadder is that Stanchik is modeled after Matejko himself. This could be, in a way, a very desolate self-portrait.
That doesn't sound like you usually playing.
It's not. I don't even care. It's like in a minor key. Every time I play, it just makes me feel better.
Have you ever heard of Freud's idea of sublimation?
What is sublimation?
Let me explain. Freud said that we all have feelings such as rage, shame, frustration, and we find we don't know how to deal with it sometimes. Sometimes those feelings get repressed. Do you know what that means?
No.
To repress is to push those feelings down deep somewhere, but we don't have to face them. However, they don't just disappear. Instead, we find ways to redirect those feelings. For example, music, art, writing. That's called sublimation. Now, what are you doing in sublimation? You playing this piano? Sublimation.
Oh, so I'm sublimating my frustration into an art, in this case music.
Exactly. You're taking something negative and creating something beautiful, whether you realize it or not.
So that's why when I played the song in the minor key, I felt like I was getting rid of a frustration.
Yes, for example, in the book called A Streetcar Named Desire, Tennessee Williams plays the Varsuviana, which is a form of repression for the main character Blanche, in a minor key because it shows that she's going back to the state where she was sad. Tennessee Williams was one of America's greatest playwright. However, his life was anything but easy. He grew up in the South with a dysfunctional family. For example, his father was abusive, his mother was overbearing, and his sister was the only one who seemed to love him. However, she was eventually institutionalized.
Sounds rough.
It was. And on top of that, Williams was also homosexual, which at that time, the society shamed on him for being homosexual. Imagine being yourself and being hated on.
So he wrote instead.
Exactly. The repressed feelings from being hated on by the society, he sublimated them into art. His art is his form of writing, for example. So, Streetcar Named Desire. Look at the characters in Streetcar Named Desire. For example, we could assume that Stanley is the abusive father, Blanche is the overbearing mother, and Stella is the institutionalized sister. He rarely showed homosexuality in a positive light. This is because he couldn't accept it himself. His writing was his way of coping, of processing all that past.
Wait, so writing Streetcar was his piano?
Exactly. His typewriter, his Streetcar Named Desire is your piano.
Oh, that makes sense. Sometimes you don't even realize that you're holding on to stuff until you actually let it out.
Exactly. That's the power of sublimation. It doesn't erase the pain, but it turns your pain, negative stuff, into something that's positive and beautiful. And that's what art does. It transforms.
In A Streetcar Named Desire, Tennessee Williams crafts a world brimming with broken dreams and raw human emotion. Among its haunting characters is Alan Gray, a man whose tragic story serves as more than just a plot point. It becomes a mirror reflecting Williams' own struggles with identity and shame. Alan Gray is a young man whose hidden sexuality leads to devastating consequences. His love for another man, discovered and ridiculed, drives him to end his life. But Alan is more than a character. He is Tennessee Williams sublimated, a projection of the playwright's own turmoil as a gay man in a society that deemed his identity unacceptable. Williams knew firsthand the sting of rejection and the weight of societal expectations. Like Alan, Williams battled the shame imposed by a world that couldn't or wouldn't understand him. Sublimation in psychoanalysis is the process of transforming inner conflict into something creative, even beautiful. For Williams, this transformation took place in his writing. Alan's tragic end, his metaphorical castration, may well represent Williams' own fear of losing his voice. Alan Gray's story is not merely a subplot, it's a cry from Williams' soul. It's a reminder of the silent battles fought by those who dared to love differently in a world that demanded conformity.